sit on courage and right through a 34 community service. And that drink gotta keep when I hit it. I can't stay out the hood cause I think that shit hurt me. Hey, bro, my rats get tall, but nigga, I'm a mythic. The nigga wanna pause, you better go get it. First like Adderall, you niggas don't feel it. Hey.
Top story, the murder trial of Quincy Wade continuing in Columbus today. He's accused of killing a local rapper back in September of 2021. The defense claims that it was self-defense, but prosecutors say it was a love triangle that ended in death. News 9's Amaya Graham was in the courtroom earlier today. She joins us now live from the Government Center. Amaya, so bring us the details from today's proceedings. Tell us more about what happened.
Well, Barbara, jurors on this case heard from a slew of Columbus police officers who worked the scene back in September of 2021. I also spoke to the victim's father on how he feels so far about this case.
Because at the end of the day, if he would have waited another day to handle that with her, my son would still be here today.
Quincy Wade was arrested in LaGrange and charged with the murder of local rapper Maurice Vaughn-Jackson, who is also known as Lil Nuke. The killing took place at Patriot Place Apartments off of Buena Vista Road back in September of 2021.
In the early hours of September morning, a quiet Columbus apartment complex became the scene of a deadly confrontation that would later draw intense public and legal scrutiny. At the center of the case was a 26-year-old rising rapper whose life was cut short in a matter of minutes. What began as a late-night visit turned into a violent encounter that investigators would later describe as a collision of personal ties, broken trust, and an uninvited arrival. The investigation quickly pointed to someone with a close history to those present that night, raising questions about motive, opportunity, and intent. As the case unfolded in court, the details presented painted a picture of conflicting narratives, each side offering a different version of what led to the fatal gunfire. What truly happened in that apartment will become the focus of a trial that sought to answer whether the killing was a crime or a consequence. If you enjoy real crime stories that uncover truth, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us share real cases, spread awareness, and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Uncovered, where we examine the cases that shake communities and expose what happened behind closed doors. Real stories, real people, real impact. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Maurice Vaughn-Jackson was a 26-year-old man from Columbus, Georgia, known locally by his rap name Lil Nuke. Within the Columbus rap scene, he was seen as a rising voice who had already built a small but loyal audience. His music reflected the culture and realities of his environment, gaining recognition among peers who viewed him as someone capable of elevating his career to a larger platform. At the time of the incident, Vaughn-Jackson was living in Columbus and remained connected to his immediate community. His circle included other aspiring artists, neighborhood acquaintances, and close friends who supported his work. Those around him described him as someone who was working toward a future in music, with his stage name slowly gaining traction. His personal life, like many balancing ambition with day-to-day survival, was layered. He navigated relationships that blended personal ties with professional aspirations, and those intersections created both opportunities and challenges. How does a promising young career intersect with the hidden dangers of personal relationships? The location of the incident was the Patriot Place Apartments on Buena Vista Road in Columbus. This residential complex was a multi-building development, known in the area for frequent law enforcement responses. By 2021, Columbus had seen a significant rise in violent crime, with the year marking one of its deadliest in recent history. The city recorded its 50th homicide by early September, and Vaughn-Jackson's death became a grim milestone in that total. The apartment where the events unfolded was occupied by a young woman who played a central role in the case. This woman was connected both to the victim, Vaughn-Jackson, and to the accused, Quincy Tyreek Wade. Her relationship with Vaughn-Jackson was current, while her history with Wade was past, but not entirely disconnected. That overlap created the conditions for conflict. The apartment itself, while ordinary in appearance, became the crossroads of a fatal encounter that would later be dissected in court. It was not just a random setting. It was a location that tied together all the individuals involved through overlapping relationships. On the evening before the incident, Vaughn-Jackson visited the Patriot Place apartment to spend time with the woman living there. The visit was not unusual, as their relationship had grown closer over time. He was there during the late-night hours, unaware that his presence would coincide with an unanticipated confrontation. Inside the apartment, besides the victim and the woman, there was also a significant detail. The woman was pregnant, and her condition became part of the narrative later explored in court. Her pregnancy tied her further to Wade, who had been her partner in the past. Quincy Tyreek Wade, the man later charged in the case, shared a long and complicated history with this woman. Their relationship had ended, but the connections between them had not fully dissolved. According to testimony, Wade remained a looming presence, tied both by personal history and by the fact that the woman was expecting a child. The situation that night set the stage for conflict. Vaughn-Jackson was present as the new partner. Wade was a former partner, and the apartment represented shared space in ways that blurred boundaries. What tensions arise when past relationships collide with present circumstances? During the early morning hours of September 7, 2021, Quincy Wade arrived at the apartment. Accounts differ on how he gained entry, but reports suggest he was not invited. Witnesses and investigators describe the entry as unwelcomed, raising questions about whether it was forced or simply unauthorized. Once inside, events escalated quickly. Witness statements later revealed conflicting versions of the confrontation. The prosecution argued that Wade entered aggressively, already intent on violence. The defense countered that the situation was chaotic, that Wade was confronted by Vaughn-Jackson, and that self-defense played a role in what followed. Details of the encounter remain contested. What is undisputed is that multiple shots were fired, striking Vaughn-Jackson fatally. The room's atmosphere shifted from argument to gunfire in moments, leaving the woman, pregnant and in the middle of the confrontation, as a key witness to what occurred. The central question debated in court and among the public was who initiated the violence. Was Wade the aggressor who entered armed and determined to act, or did the confrontation spiral when both men faced each other under volatile conditions? Was this a premeditated attack, or did events spiral out of control in seconds? In the early morning hours of September 7, 2021, a call for assistance was placed from the Patriot Place apartments on Buena Vista Road in Columbus, Georgia. It was shortly after 2 a.m. when law enforcement officers were dispatched to the scene following reports of shots fired inside one of the apartment units. The quiet residential complex was disrupted by an event that would later become one of the city's most scrutinized homicide cases of that year. When officers arrived, they discovered Maurice Vaughn-Jackson, a 26-year-old rapper known locally as Lil Nuke, lying inside the apartment. He had sustained multiple gunshot wounds. The exact number of shots was recorded in the official police file, but accounts confirmed that more than one round struck him, causing injuries that proved immediately fatal. Emergency responders attempted assessment, but confirmed that Maurice had already succumbed to his wounds before transport could be arranged. The interior of the apartment quickly became a crime scene. Detectives and evidence technicians documented the position of the victim, shell casings, and any signs of forced entry. Witnesses present were separated and questioned on the spot. The woman who lived in the apartment, along with others who had been inside during the confrontation, provided initial statements. Officers locked down the perimeter, marking the unit as restricted while gathering physical and testimonial evidence. The confirmation of Maurice's death at the scene marked Columbus's 50th homicide of 2021, placing additional public pressure on authorities to respond quickly and decisively. Within hours of the shooting, Columbus police issued statements to the media acknowledging the death and confirming that an active homicide investigation was underway. At the center of early inquiries was Quincy Tyreek Wade, a man with personal ties to the woman whose apartment Maurice had been in at the time of his death. Wade had a prior relationship with her, and his presence at the apartment that night was deemed unauthorized by investigators. Detectives pieced together accounts from witnesses that pointed to Wade as the individual who arrived uninvited, confronted those inside, and ultimately discharged a firearm that killed Maurice. Based on collected evidence and corroborated testimony, law enforcement moved quickly to establish Wade as the primary suspect. Formal charges were drawn up, including malice murder, alleging Wade intentionally caused the death, felony murder, tied to the commission of a separate felony during the killing, aggravated assault for using a firearm to inflict harm, home invasion for entering the apartment unlawfully and armed. The announcement of these charges was accompanied by widespread media coverage in Columbus. Community members reacted strongly, with debates circulating on local outlets and social media about the circumstances of the crime. Many questioned whether this was an act of calculated aggression or a heated conflict that escalated beyond control. How quickly can investigators piece together what happened when multiple versions of events emerge? Following the issuance of warrants, Wade was taken into custody within days of the shooting. His arrest concluded the initial phase of the investigation, but it marked the beginning of a lengthy legal battle that would extend over 2 years. In his first court appearance, Wade was formally read the charges. The prosecution laid out the foundation of its case, emphasizing witness statements, the crime scene evidence, and Wade's alleged forced entry into the apartment. They argued that his actions showed intent and that the fatal shooting was not spontaneous but deliberate. On the other side, Wade's defense team began shaping an alternative narrative from the start. They challenged the accusation of unlawful entry and pointed to circumstances suggesting that Wade's actions might have been in response to immediate threats. This initial stance would evolve into the central theme of their courtroom argument: self-defense. The months following the arrest were marked by pretrial hearings, motions, and discovery, as both sides prepared to present conflicting accounts of the deadly encounter. The trial of Quincy Wade commenced in September 2023, 2 years after the death of Maurice Vaughn-Jackson. The courtroom became the setting where the competing stories of what happened inside the Patriot Place apartment would be tested before a jury. The prosecution's argument was straightforward. They contended that Wade entered the apartment without permission, violating both the physical boundaries of the residents and the safety of those inside. According to their case, he arrived armed and confronted his former partner and her new companion. They asserted that the evidence, from shell casings to the trajectory of the gunfire, showed that Wade opened fire with the intent to kill, which legally met the standard for murder. The defense countered with a starkly different interpretation. They framed the confrontation as one where Wade felt compelled to protect himself. Their claim of self-defense was reinforced by references to a volatile relationship between Wade and the pregnant woman present at the apartment. The defense suggested that the sequence of events may not have been as one-sided as the prosecution presented, introducing doubt over whether Wade had been the aggressor. Witness testimony played a central role. The woman who lived in the apartment, along with others who had knowledge of the relationships involved, were called to the stand. Each account added to the puzzle, but their statements also highlighted inconsistencies and differing perspectives. The jury was left to navigate these contradictions in order to determine which version most closely aligned with the facts. The central conflict of the trial revolved around a single, crucial question. Was this a calculated killing or a defensive act triggered by escalating tensions? When two sides present entirely different stories, how do jurors decide which version carries the truth? On September 29, 2023, the courtroom in Muskogee County reached a decisive moment in a trial that had been closely followed for 2 years. The case centered on the fatal shooting of rapper Maurice Vaughn-Jackson, better known as Lil Nuke, and the defendant, Quincy Tyreek Wade, who faced multiple serious charges. The proceedings concluded with a jury tasked to determine whether the evidence supported the claims of prosecutors or the defense narrative presented by Wade's attorneys. The jury entered deliberations after hearing final arguments from both sides. Jurors were instructed to weigh the charges carefully: malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and home invasion. Each carried different legal standards and potential sentences. The prosecution argued Wade's entry into the apartment was unlawful and led directly to Vaughn-Jackson's death, framing it as intentional and criminal. The defense countered with claims of self-defense, suggesting that Wade's actions were not premeditated, but instead a reaction to perceived threats in a volatile environment. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with its decision. On the most serious charges, Wade was acquitted. He was found not guilty of malice murder, a charge that required proof of intent to kill. He was also acquitted of felony murder, which ties a killing to the commission of another felony. In addition, the jury cleared him of aggravated assault and home invasion, 2 charges central to the prosecution's version of events. The outcome reflected the jury's conclusion that the state had not met its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt on these counts. However, the jury did not release Wade from all responsibility. He was convicted of criminal trespass, a misdemeanor charge. Unlike the dismissed felonies, this charge recognized that Wade entered the property without legal right, but it carried far lighter consequences. Sentencing for criminal trespass is capped at 1 year in jail. Wade had already spent more than 2 years in custody awaiting trial. As a result, the court ruled that his time served satisfied the full punishment for misdemeanor conviction. With this decision, Wade was not required to serve additional prison time. The verdict immediately generated strong reactions both inside and outside the courtroom. For Wade, the acquittals meant release from the most severe accusations, avoiding the prospect of life imprisonment or even capital punishment that could have followed a murder conviction. His attorneys emphasized that the jury had carefully weighed conflicting evidence and sided with the defense on critical points. For the family of Maurice Vaughn-Jackson, the decision carried different implications. The loss of a son, brother, and community figure was undisputed, but the legal outcome left questions about accountability. With Wade convicted only of trespassing, there was no official recognition by the court that his actions directly caused Vaughn-Jackson's death in a criminal sense. Families in such situations often struggle with the difference between legal resolution and personal closure. The acquittals, while final in the court of law, did not necessarily answer the lingering question of what truly unfolded in the apartment that night. In the wider community, debate quickly followed. Some observers viewed the verdict as a failure of the system to deliver justice for a life lost, questioning whether flaws in evidence presentation or legal strategy affected the outcome. Others saw it as an example of the legal process functioning as designed, with jurors upholding the principle that conviction requires proof beyond reasonable doubt. The divided responses reflected the broader challenge of reconciling legal judgments with public perceptions of fairness. Wade's release also raised questions about future accountability. Having been acquitted of murder, he cannot be retried on those charges due to protections against double jeopardy. This legal finality reinforced a sense for some that the case ended without a full reckoning of responsibility. For others, it underscored the system's safeguards against wrongful conviction. Does an acquittal always mean closure, or can it leave more unanswered questions than answers? The case highlighted how domestic disputes and personal relationships can escalate into violent confrontations with lasting consequences. At its core, the shooting was tied not only to the individuals directly involved, but also to the tensions arising from a past relationship. Wade's history with a woman present at the apartment created the backdrop for the fatal encounter. The court proceedings repeatedly returned to this element, examining how unresolved personal ties contributed to a volatile and ultimately deadly confrontation. Such cases underscore the risks when domestic conflicts intersect with access to weapons and confrontational decision-making. For Columbus, Georgia, Vaughn-Jackson's death marked the city's 50th homicide of 2021, a statistic that drew attention to the rising violence in the area. His case was one among many, but stood out due to his public profile as a musician. The trial brought broader awareness to patterns of crime in the city, linking personal disputes to the larger narrative of urban violence. The verdict also sparked discussion about how the justice system addresses cases with conflicting narratives. Prosecutors framed the event as an unlawful and intentional act. The defense described it as self-defense in a chaotic situation. The jury's decision to acquit on major charges but convict on trespass reflected the challenge of reaching consensus when facts are disputed and witnesses provide differing accounts. For some, this raised concerns about whether the legal system is equipped to uncover definitive truths in cases where only a few individuals were present and their accounts diverged sharply. Unresolved questions remain central to the story. What exactly occurred inside the apartment in the moments before shots were fired? Did the jury's verdict reveal the reality of the situation, or did it reflect limitations in the evidence presented? Can a legal outcome be considered justice if it leaves one side without a sense of accountability? These uncertainties keep the case relevant long after the courtroom proceedings ended. For communities observing from the outside, the case serves as a reminder of how fragile safety can be when personal disputes escalate. It also raises important questions about systemic issues, how domestic conflict are handled before they turn violent, how law enforcement investigates such cases, and how courts interpret competing narratives. The trial of Quincy Tariq Wade for the death of Maurice Vaughn-Jackson concluded with mixed outcome: acquittal on all major charges, conviction only on a misdemeanor, and release after time served. The decision resolved the case legally but left open questions about justice, responsibility, and the nature of truth in violent disputes. When the courts have spoken but doubts remain, do we accept a verdict as a final word, or do we continue to search for answers that the law cannot provide? If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.